So welcome everyone to our co-occurring series, Divergent Dialogues. Today we'll be talking about giftedness, and I'm really excited to have Jennifer here with us today. So I'll tell you a little bit about Jennifer. Jennifer Harvey Sallin is a psychologist who specializes in supporting intellectually gifted adults. Giftedness is often a forgotten neurodivergence with its own special needs throughout the lifespan. Jennifer raises awareness about this form of neurodivergence through her work, especially as the founding director of an international community and support organization for gifted adults called InterGifted, which you can find at www.intergifted.com. She has created a model of giftedness that looks at more than just intellectual intelligence and includes emotional, sensual, physical, creative, and existential intelligences, as well as giftedness co-occurring with other neurodivergences, such as ADHD, autism, learning differences, and other brain differences, often called twice and multi-exceptionality. She is especially interested in the role of trauma and healing on the gifted person's path and explores this topic in depth on her Conversations on Trauma podcast, which can be found on Spotify and anywhere you listen to podcasts. She lives in Switzerland and works throughout the world with the gifted population. So thank you so much for joining with us today.
Happy to be here.
Excellent. So I'm actually really keen to hear about like what inspired your the model of giftedness that you created.
It's a great question. One that people don't ask that much. There's a lot of assumption that, like, I don't know, that it's just obvious, or sometimes people say, oh, well, you just took it from the Dabrowski overexcitability's work or something like that. And I'm like, I know it's so much more complicated than that. So as a child already, I was pretty obsessed with, like, how does the brain work? And as soon as I learned about the concept of neuroscience, I was just totally obsessed. So I was around all things like consciousness studies, like what is the origin of consciousness, personality study, like what's the origin of personality development? How do we become human and do what we do, or become individuated and do what we do? Because I think, animals and other things have personalities too. We're not the only ones. And so I studied a lot of that. I obviously studied psychology to become a psychologist, and all of these things together got me thinking about, like, what is intelligence in general? So not, even before the question of giftedness, like, what is intelligence in general? And it's not just logical stuff, right? It's also like intuition. It's also sensorial awareness. It's also, existential awareness and other things. And so this was all in my mind. And then the giftedness came along. I was a gifted kid in gifted school, but then I forgot about that. And then I rediscovered it later. And when I decided to make it my specialization, I thought, oh, there's all this stuff I've been studying for all these years, and this kind of formation of personality that's come around in my mind, and this understanding of what is intelligence in general. And now I can apply it to giftedness. And so, it took a while for me to figure out how to put those two things together, or those many things together, but those two main domains, consciousness and personality, and then giftedness. And that ended up resulting in the 6 areas of intelligence that I, use in my model. And at first, it's funny, I didn't even call it a model. I was just like, oh yeah, like, I don't know, being neurodivergent anyway. I was just like, all right, like, this is just kind of obvious, and that's just what it is. And people were like, oh, so, your model of giftedness. And I was like, huh, that sounds so formal. And then I realized over time, like, I actually had to call it a model so that people knew what I was doing and knew how they could use it, right? So then I developed the assessments around it. So qualitative assessments, like looking at people's intellectual giftedness, intellectual intelligence. I could also do an assessment for somebody who's not gifted, but then their thing would look a little bit differently. Their cognitive map would look a little different. But so the intellectual intelligence and emotional and existential and physical, creative and sensual, and I started looking at that, like, as a qualitative way of understanding giftedness and mapping out somebody's gifted mind, like, how are their intelligences working together? And sometimes somebody will be gifted in some ways, like emotional and existential, but not intellectual. And that looks different, right? Like than somebody who's intellectually gifted and not the others, or less the others, or the same with the other areas of intelligence. And I mean, the goal around it was always, since I'm a psychologist, obviously, like my goal was always to help people to understand their minds and kind of be able to tap into their own creative agency. And, you know, self-awareness is a big part of that. And growing up in school, even though I was in gifted education, I never got that around the giftedness. It was just like, you're smarter, you know, okay, well,
congrats, you're smarter.
What do I do with that? Right? And like, besides, like, I don't know, do harder math problems or something. And then, you know, ongoing development, like figuring out how do I live this life that is kind of different than the other people, and what do I do with it? And so it was always focused on the self-awareness and self-development, and, you know, advocating for one's needs the way that they are. And I was always like, you know, we're told, well, now gender is a bigger question, but, you know, we're kind of taught about our gender somehow, at least back in the day. The way that it was. And we're taught about our culture, and we're taught about our language, and we're taught about the economy, and, you know, these kinds of things. But like, who's teaching self-awareness? I don't know. You know, to kids, who's teaching kids how to be self-aware emotionally, and aware of their personality, and aware of maybe their neurocognitive whatever differences, and how to advocate for that. And there's like so little. And so that was my big focus, kind of in looking at all of this stuff.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I feel like I got insider knowledge now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, when I saw your model of giftedness, I'd never seen anything like it before. And I think my experience in Australia is that giftedness isn't really a big thing here. It's not really something people talk about in education, in therapeutic spaces, at least in my experience. And for I guess the little that I did know about giftedness, even throughout my my formal education, I didn't really learn much about giftedness. But what I did learn about it was, it's all about IQ. It's all about intelligence. And I guess the way that I practice with my clients is, you know, I think everyone has their different strengths, no matter what that is. And I think what I loved about your model of giftedness is that it's not just focusing on intelligence, and it's celebrating other people that, you know, who are really creative or may display their intelligence in another way, which I don't think that there's not really a big focus on that, I feel. What do you think, Teena? Have you had some experiences?
I completely agree. You know, I have 3 kids, and my son is dyslexic. So like the reading and writing, the academic stuff, he's 11. That's really difficult for him. But you ask him to play sport, doesn't matter what it is, he's going to be good at it. And he's just naturally gifted in that space. And I have this frustrating battle where trying to get him that support and acknowledgement around that. Yeah, the academic stuff is hard for him, but let's not focus just on that. You know, he absolutely will learn the skills he needs to get through life in terms of reading, writing, and all that kind of stuff. But why can't we really champion the fact that this kid can pick a sport and do it? You know, his very first swimming carnival in primary school, he beat everyone by a lap of the pool. And I'm just like, whoa, okay, that happened. And yeah, there's just the whole concept of gifted here in Australia really does, if it is mentioned with that term gifted, it really does focus on IQ and academics. And it's a shame, because there is so much brilliance that is missed because it's not considered intelligence.
Right. Yeah, and I guess I think that sometimes there can be this one view of what a gifted person is, like this super academic, nerdy person that perhaps doesn't have social skills, which completely isn't true. Obviously, there's a diversity in gifted folks. So I guess, Jennifer, I was really curious to hear about like how does giftedness kind of show up? Like, what's that diversity? Like, what does it look like? You work with so many gifted people from all over the world. So what do they look like? Are they is that the picture that you see, or is it a little bit different?
I mean, it is so diverse. And I think when you're looking at intellectual giftedness, which is kind of the main, if somebody says out there gifted, oh, she's a gifted person, they're probably talking about first intellectual giftedness. So something that's kind of in the zone of IQ, high IQ. In fact, when I'm talking to somebody who knows nothing about any of this, or who is just a stranger on the street, and they say, "What do you do?" I say I'm a psychologist. And then if they press like, "Well, what's your specialty?" I say, "I work with people with high IQ." Even though that's so oversimplified, it's kind of the general shorthand for understanding intellectual giftedness. But one thing that I was like so curious about at the beginning of my work was like, I had met so many people who were so good at some things, but then when I would engage with them intellectually, I would see like they don't have that. So for example, I'm a musician and I study music as well. And I would meet other people in the music world who were like really high performers and way better at music than me. Like just they had a gift that was even more like they were probably physically gifted, and they could just memorize a piece like it was nobody's business. And I would think, oh, okay, so they must have a mind like mine. And then I would engage with them on the intellectual level and it wouldn't be there. And I'd be like, wait, I'm so confused. Like, does the one not go with the other, or what? And these kinds of questions, also like the sports question, like people who are just like brilliant at sports, I'm not, I would be like, oh my God, they're so skilled. Like they must be able to engage on the intellectual level. And then, I mean, we can think about in the movies, and probably we've all known somebody who's like extremely good at sports, but like, so the jock, I don't know, like I'm thinking, I'm an 80s child. So thinking like the jock in the movies who is like so brilliant, but has to have everybody else, so brilliant at sports, but has to have like everybody else do their homework for them because they're struggling so much in the academic, And so I was like, so it can't just be about like one kind of profile, that you're super smart at school and you're perfect at sports and you can take up the piano and that and that and that. And also something to consider in that is like multi-potentiality. And some gifted people are what is called multi-potentialites. So like they have like really high skill or really high aptitude across many domains. So like music, art, academic studies, I don't know, if you go into the sciences, different versions of the sciences and so on and so on. And that not every gifted person is even like that. So you can have somebody that is gifted in one area, not the others, or gifted across all areas, or gifted across all areas and a multi-potentialite, or it's like the combinations are endless. The way I originally described it was like variations on a theme. Like you have the theme of complexity, and then the question is, in what area? Complex in what area? Higher than average complexity, and then in what area or what areas, and how do those areas work together? And then, of course, are there other neurodivergences that accompany it? Because somebody who is, let's say, gifted in all areas, is a multi-potentialite, and is autistic and has ADHD, that's going to be a totally different profile than somebody who doesn't have those extra neurodivergences. So it's like, it's incredible. I mean, I've been doing this in the gifted field for like over a decade, and I still do assessments all the time. And I always think, well, nothing could surprise me now. And then like the next assessment will surprise me. And I'll be like, oh my God, I've never seen this profile before. It's so interesting. Like every profile is so interesting and so unique. So to a degree, like the variations are endless. And I think that's like, I mean, that's reassuring because when you think about, like you're saying in Australia, like this idea, it's only somebody with a high IQ and they'll be fine. Like we don't need to think about that. I mean, that's many cultures. And I don't know, it's isolating. It's weird. It makes you feel like not so human, and not be able to like find out and define what are all these extras, and what is this complex thing going on inside either my mind or my body, or both, or both that and spirit, or kind of all the different ways that complexity can show up for us.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a saying in the autism community that if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And I'm getting the feeling it's the same with gifted folks as well. You've met one gifted person, you've met one gifted person.
Yeah, it's very much that. And, and it's the same with autism. Like, you meet another autistic person, you're like, oh, great, somebody who's like systems thinker and is blunt, and, who isn't like going by the usual norm scripts. Cool. Like, and so there is a starting point where there's something that like really unites you, or there's a resonant frequency kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then how that applies across, contexts and in terms of spectrums, like you can be more sensory sensitive, or you can be less verbal or more verbal, or there's like all different things, right? And it's the same thing with giftedness. And so when people come into the InterGifted community, we have like a whole, Caitlin, you've seen it, like we have a whole guide that says like, welcome to our community. Okay, here's the things to keep in mind as you're connecting. Like
I read that whole guide, just so you know.
Yeah, most people do, and they're like, wow, that's so cool that you do this whole guide, because it sets up expectations. I mean, we came up with a guide after years of
muddling through
right. And because people were coming in and going, yay, my gifted tribe, and then kind of like being like, I can just show up with my full authentic self and nobody's going to judge me and everybody's going to understand what I'm talking about. It depends. And people sometimes would meet each other. They'd like, meet in person or meet online separately outside of our main community space. And then they'd be like, oh, I had a bad experience. Maybe I don't like gifted people as much as I thought, or something like this. And I'd be like, yeah, but I mean, we're still all like diverse humans, even if we have like a similar way of complexifying things. One person will complexify toward, I'm going to be really extreme right now, but one person will use their complexity to complexify toward doing evil acts. And another person will complexify their experience and their thoughts and stuff toward helping the world be a better place. Again, just, using a very extreme example, but those two aren't going to get along so well, even though they're both very complex people. And like, I'm always joking about that because I'm more on the, doing nice things for the world side. And I'm like, I would rather like hang around a non-gifted person who's like wanting to do good things for the world than a gifted person who's like wanting to, sow evil in the world, so to speak. And so, yeah, I mean, just because you meet another gifted person isn't like, oh, great, we're going to be besties for all time and we're going to understand each other completely. It's like, and it's also why I do the assessments the way that I do it, because I'm like, if you understand your gifted needs, like if you understand your complex gifted profile and you understand your gifted needs, then when you go into relationships with gifted people, you're not in a black and white, mindset. You're in a nuanced mindset going, all right, we're both gifted people, but we both have unique profiles, and let's see how they get along together. And like taking the time and knowing kind of how to discuss things and how to test things, like we do in relationships, to make sure that this person is a good fit for us. And so, yeah, it helps to keep that nuanced discussion and exploration going on so that people can really connect with each other for who they are, and minimize projection, because I mean, projection's it's the big devil in the room, so to speak,
Yeah, I'm just I think so I guess for a bit of context for the listeners, so I was diagnosed autistic and ADHD, and I still felt like there was a bit of a missing piece for me. And like I came across InterGifted and the Positive Disintegration podcast. Give it a listen. And it really changed my life, because I felt like as a late diagnosed autistic ADHDer, these puzzle pieces were all kind of coming into place, but I still felt like there was something missing for me. And when I came across Giftedness, and I read the InterGifted website, and I read through all the blogs, everything, and it was the first time that I really felt that someone was inside of my brain explaining how my brain worked, and it kind of freaked me out a little, but it was pretty awesome. And I read it and reread it because part of me is like, I don't know, I guess like in the context of Australian culture, I don't think that intelligence is really supported. It's kind of like, if you confidently say that you're intelligent or anything like that, it's shot down a lot. I guess in Australia, it's this kind of let's be humble, and if you say that you're better, you're like, people kind of perceive that you're saying that you're better than them, and all this kind of stuff. So it's very squashed down a lot. And so I guess in my mind, to think like, do I seriously think I'm gifted? Like, am I full of myself? Like, all this stuff went through my head. And then I was like, no, I'm going to do an assessment. And I did. And it was one of the best things that I ever did, because for a really long time, I thought that, well, not a really long time, because I was only diagnosed autistic not long ago, but I thought a lot of my challenge in connecting with others was due to autism, but I actually realized it was due to the giftedness. That was the thing that, and that was the piece that it was really freeing, because I came to, I guess, that realization that you were saying, that everyone's different, and not everyone's going to connect with me in that intellectual way necessarily, but that's okay. And it's not my job or their job to like try and force this connection that's not going to happen. So yeah, that was really freeing for me. So I guess that leads into my next question. So why do you think giftedness is so important for like self-understanding and mental health?
Well, to build on what you just said, you know, if you are going into, let's say you're neurodivergent in another way, and you're going into neurodivergent spaces, and you're going, all right, I'm going to get all my needs met here because these are people who get me. And then you find out, by lived experience, by trying, you find out like, I don't know, man, there's like some intellectual distance I want to run, and the people around me aren't going there. And so like, they might be lovely people and we might connect on a lot of other levels, but like, as soon as I'm going, ready to like take the intellectual complex journey out there, they're like overwhelmed or not interested or whatever. And that can be really painful. And I mean, I'm talking about the intellectual here, but also that could be creative or existential. Like, you start asking the big existential questions, and then people around you are like, I don't know, what's that all about? Who cares, And that can be really painful to not get those needs met, And so if you have higher complexity, you might be thinking, well, something's wrong with me. And I don't see other people doing this. I don't see other people asking these questions. I don't see other people irritating other people by asking these complex questions, And you could conclude something's wrong with me. And so there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that, your brain goes further than some other brains in that regard, whatever it is, existential or intellectual or combination of a bunch of them. And it, like you said, Caitlin, it's like when you're figuring out like, I have needs that are not being met, and like, do I dare legitimize them and get them met? It's really helpful to ground into some kind of anchor. Like, that's again why I decided in the end, okay, yeah, I'll call it a model and make it kind of official.
Yeah.
Because it helps people to go, oh, there's a model out there and it's holistic, and it legitimizes these feelings that I'm having and these needs that I'm having. And it says, this is a real thing. I mean, I didn't make up giftedness. I just put some words to the way that I see it. So it's not like my model's a real thing, but the person's giftedness itself is the real thing, but the model legitimizes, it puts language to that real thing, and it says that's a real thing, I see it, or somebody has seen it, and you can see it too, and you can legitimize it too, and you can name it, and then you can get the needs met around that. So obviously somebody who grew up, like, let's say in a super gifted family where they got their complex intellectual or what existential needs met, like in the family, it's a dream, right? In the family, and then like they went to gifted education and whatever, they're going to be way less likely to be in deep need of self-awareness work, gifted self-awareness work, obviously, but since our culture, and especially as you're talking about like in Australia, the tall poppy syndrome, since our cultures don't really focus on giftedness, and fair enough, I mean, it's a very small percentage of the population, like some research says around 2%. I mean, if you're taking IQ scores, I would widen that significantly based on what I know, but I mean, not much more than 5 or 10%, let's say. So it's still a very small percent of the population. And that makes it unlikely that a gifted person grows up knowing about their giftedness and knowing about the emotional and lifelong, like the lifespan issues of giftedness. And so a lot of us are just entering adulthood going, what the hell? Yeah. Where am I going to fit in? Is this part of me like something that I keep having to, that I'm going to have to keep masking, that I'm going to have to keep like suppressing, or like use force so that people will take it seriously, or that kind of stuff. And I mean, that's painful.
Yeah.
So doing the giftedness self-awareness work is really important for legitimizing all of that and realizing like, yeah, it's okay, like you're like that, and that you're like that, and it's okay even if the culture says that it's not okay. It's okay. You just have to find a way to have some creative agency in there. Yeah. And make some room. Like you don't have to have the whole culture that supports you. You have to have enough people around you. Enough.
Yeah, I mean, I've given up trying to keep up with culture and what's normal. I've just accepted that train, that bus, plane, whatever. It's left. It's gone. It's out of the building like 31 years ago. So, but yeah, I guess probably a part of the reason why it took me so long to find, I guess, my giftedness is because I am an autistic ADHDer, and based on the version of giftedness that is usually perpetuated around IQ, unfortunately, my grades would be inconsistent, and I wouldn't be the one winning all the awards and all this kind of like all these sorts of things. So yeah, I think like it'd be really good to get a bit of a understanding of I guess the different needs for like autistic and ADHD gifted folks. Like that, does that look different again?
Yeah, I love you bring it up, and it's one of my motivations for talking with neurodivergence educators about it, because a lot of gifted people who are autistic or have ADHD or ... fill in the blank, other neurodivergence, may be missed because of their giftedness. Or sometimes giftedness ends up covering up for a lot of the struggles that come with other neurodivergences. And so the other neurodivergences can also be missed, and that's a really important conversation to have, because for people who are who have ADHD or autistic or something and miss their giftedness because of I usually say contextual disability side. It's a tough word, but just that it, struggling in neuronorm situations, right, and contexts, that they usually have a very spiky profile. That's what we call it. So like maybe one area of IQ is like high, and other areas of IQ are really low, and that can skew the IQ quite far down. Yeah. Also, autism and ADHD specifically, but dyslexia and other things, learning differences, very much skew our capacities on an IQ test in general, right? So like, even if it's not a spiky profile, it might just skew the results in general because of the different way of approaching questions. I like autism wise, it's so funny because like I can go into an IQ question and then I'm like, well, the way that you asked the question is wrong because of this, that, and the other thing. And I can't answer it like unless you fix the way that you asked the question so that it's clear what answer you're looking for. But that's not going to get me the points of the IQ test, And so that's, there are ways of that an autistic person thinks, and also then ADHD, there are ways that are difficult, like it's difficult to concentrate or something. And so they might, an ADHD person might not do so well on a test, even though they have the capacities there. But because of the testing conditions and like just making the whole thing so damn linear, the whole process of IQ testing is like so linear, that, a lot of times it's not going to show. And I mean, outside of IQ testing in general, in education, in terms of like recognition, many teachers aren't going to recognize that the disruptive child is gifted. That, the disruptive ADHD child, for example, is gifted, or they might see the autism deficits, as they're calling them, and go, oh, well, that person couldn't be extra smart. And so, this dismissal that comes when there's a whole complex of neurodivergences happening at the same time. And so, it's really important that the gifted community and the neurodivergent community, the larger neurodivergent community, is talking about these kinds of, profiles that could fall through the cracks, so to speak, and be missed on a lot of levels. I mean, that's a particularly painful experience because like you can almost be like not recognized for anything that you've got going on because there's some almost like some kind of matter antimatter situation canceling each other out or something.
I feel so seen right now.
Right. I know.
Teena, I just wanted. Oh, sorry.
Oh, just to add, and then I'd like to hear from Teena too. Just to add that also this can help some neurodivergent people who are not gifted to understand why their relationships with neurodivergent people who are gifted. So like, let's say you have two autistic people hanging out and one is gifted and one is not. Then you can, that other person can start to understand why they might be like overwhelmed and not getting, like sort of getting irritated or getting, I don't know, just a general overwhelm with that other person, and realize like, they don't have to question their autism. They don't have to question themselves. They don't have to get super irritated with the other person. And it can help just in general, if the community is the extended, neurodivergence community is better educated about this particular neurodivergence, giftedness, people can recognize it in each other. And there's less of a risk of like it being missed and falling through the cracks again, both for people who are gifted and not.
Yeah. And I think that's what happened with me, is that I couldn't see myself represented in the autistic community. Like there was just something that wasn't clicking for me. And then when I found the gifted piece, then it kind of made a bit more sense. But yes, Teena, we'll give you the floor. I feel like you've probably been sitting there like your little ADHD brain just going, no, I want to say something.
Well, no, actually, my brain is a bit mushy today, if I'm being perfectly honest. So,
Well, you made the exception to record for me later since I'm in Switzerland, so thank you very much.
That's okay. But it does, my brain does start to shut down in the afternoons. I'm much more of an early person. So I wasn't burning to speak.
Okay, that's all good. I just wanted to be kind and give you the space if you
thank you.
wanted to. That's all good. Excellent. So that's that's such an interesting point about because I think like other than InterGifted, I really don't feel like there's a lot of discussion around giftedness, particularly the co-occurrence with like autism, ADHD, and other neurodivergences as well. So I think it's so important because you really you need all the puzzle pieces, and it needs to be holistic. Otherwise you've kind of like half figured yourself out, which is helpful and not helpful.
Right, I know. I mean, you can imagine a person like going and getting identified as gifted separately as a separate thing. Nobody ever mentions anything about ADHD or anything else. Then they go get an ADHD diagnosis, separate. Giftedness is never mentioned in that context. Maybe they go get an autism diagnosis, separate. ADHD and giftedness is not mentioned in that. You know, I mean, okay, you're getting information, you're getting cross-referenced in your own mind, you know, cross-referenced information, but you're not getting professional information that says, okay, here's how these three things happen together. Here's what that looks like. And here's why, like, here's why you might have struggled. Here's how you can thrive. Like, you know, but to be fair, I mean, when I came along in the gifted world, there was like almost zero for gifted adults. And it's why I was like, well, gonna have to do it because it's not there and I need it. And so yeah. And also like neurodivergence in general is on, I mean, it being accepted the way that it is and so on, and having real education about it, like public kind of education about it is fairly new as well. So I mean, to be fair to everybody, it's not like there's anybody, one specific person we can blame, you know, we can't even really blame society. It's like kind of like, oh, well, now we're becoming aware of how important these things are. And, you know, we have the global community we can tap into to cross-reference. I think something that's really interesting about this is, like before the global community was accessible to all of us, I mean, in any given place, let's say you have 2% of the population that's gifted, if I'm going to take that low number, and I don't know the percentage of neurodivergence in general in the general population, but like
I don't think anyone does.
No, smaller percentage. I mean, not the norm, obviously. And you take any one local place, you're not going to have that many people, you know? And so it's like what's happening right now is in many ways thanks to the fact that we can tap into a global community, because InterGifted wouldn't exist if it was a local thing. I mean, you know, there's my husband and me, and I'm not sure I know any other local gifted people at this point. I mean, we've moved around a lot, so it's not like we've been stable in one place for a long time, but yeah, I mean, if it's just going to be your local people, you're not going to find so much. And so that's why when you think about the timing of everything and why we're all sort of struggling to define these things and make it make sense and legitimize and educate, it's because it's fairly new. And so like I teach on gifted psychology, I teach therapists and coaches and psychiatrists and stuff. And oftentimes they're like, well, you know, where's more information? Where's these resources? Where's that? And I always just say, like, just remember that the focus on gifted adults is very new. I mean, it barely existed when I came into the field about 10 years ago. And the total access to the global community and the way that we have it through social media and stuff, totally like not even a decade old, or okay, maybe a little more than a decade old. And it's like helpful to remember because we're kind of all trailblazers together figuring this out, you know?
Muddling through.
It puts less pressure on any one of us to like know it all, but also helps us to not blame anybody either, because it's not like, oh, everybody had access to this before, but they just weren't paying any attention to it. It's like, oh, well, now we're getting this global access and it makes a total difference.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a bit different to autism, where we've known about it for a long time, but everything they thought about it was completely wrong. And now they're having to like rethink it all.
Oh, that's true for giftedness as well, I would say, because I mean, there's a whole nasty history about giftedness, right? Like IQ testing and the way that it was used and the way that it's been used to like justify colonialism and stuff. Yeah, like it's in eugenics and stuff. So it's like, it's been pretty ugly. And like how it's been used to like favor privilege and justify like extreme privilege and stuff. So yeah, it's been ugly. So we are redefining it. But it's by having this global community of voices that would be marginalized, would have in the past been marginalized. Like in the past, you know, I don't know, whatever, even 50 years ago, or like even 20 years ago, maybe, as a woman who's coming out and saying, okay, here I'm talking about giftedness, nobody would have, I mean, there were the women pioneers in the gifted field, but like they were so brave, you know, like
Yeah.
Anne-Marie Roper and some of the earlier ones, like, but I don't know, it's changing the way that marginalized voices can no longer be marginalized. And then we can like we're doing this, you guys are in
Yeah.
Australia, I'm in Switzerland. That's so cool that we can do this. We wouldn't be able to do this if this global, you know, educational community didn't exist. So I don't know, it's always stuff that I like to remember when I'm when I'm like struggling with some of these issues, and then I'm like, oh right, yeah, this is all very new, and it helps me to like tap more into the gratitude about how it's changing rather than like the sadness that it didn't come before. Although I do feel sad for the people who came before, you know, they lived on this earth and then they left the earth without ever knowing these things or justify like getting to validate these things about themselves and getting to connect to the community. But even in InterGifted, I mean, we focus a lot on that, like tapping into the gifted ancestors and, you know, kind of, how can I say that? Like living out what they weren't able to live out, like as a gift back to them. I mean, this gets into like, you know, kind of some metaphysical stuff, but we do consciously look at that. Our latest community compilation through the Gifted Mindfulness Collective, which is one of our projects, it's all about that. It's called Retrieving the Bones, and it's about going back to our gifted female ancestors and, you know, kind of tapping into their wisdom and carrying their story forward, since they weren't able to, you know, speak it out themselves back then.
Yeah, excellent. I'm still just trying to figure out my giftedness, so I might journey on that for a little bit more, and then I might delve into the archives. But yeah, I think something like you said before about like the dark past is that it's something to remember that for a lot of these, you know, movements and trying to you know, change the language around all of these neurodivergences, is that like there was a really there is a really dark past on a lot of these things, and particularly people from the older generations. And, you know, it can be hard for them to have, you know, all these shiny things on TikTok and Instagram talking about all these sorts of things. So yeah, I think that's really important to acknowledge. So how do you think we can, I guess, get giftedness out there in this neurodiversity affirming discourse? I mean, obviously you're doing that with your organization, but what do we need to do to kind of get it out there?
Well, I've even gone slow with linking the two because I wanted to make sure that giftedness got its own attention to begin with, because the field was so new that I was very careful to kind of keep it in its own lane.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to give the general neurodiversity space time to mature and get some roots down again, so that it doesn't get all lumped together and then nobody knows what's what, you know. And so now I feel like
it can be confusing.
Yeah, it can, right?
Yeah.
And like there are some other communities out there that bring everybody together. So just like Neurotypicals Unite, which is cool, which is great. But then just exactly like what we were saying before, gifted people go in there and then they're like, yay, everybody's going to be mentally complex like me or emotionally complex like me or whatever. And they come in and they overwhelm people and they are, you know, projecting and demanding things that maybe some other people in the community can't give them. And so there's like kind of this heightened distress, like, you know, nervous system overload and activation, right? Like the painful nervous system activation for, you know, different parties on both sides of the question. So yeah, so it was important to kind of give it time, but I feel like it's gotten enough time and it's really solid. Like when you look at the more general neurodivergence question, I mean, I think most people hear the word neurodivergent, they think autism, ADHD, learning differences, dyslexia, etc. And I think that's good because giftedness is there's qualitatively something different about it in the sense that, well, some gifted people would call it a contextual disability, but I think usually when we're thinking about giftedness plus another neurodivergence, we're thinking high ability or high ability, high complexity with contextual disability. It's not that simplified, but I think it's a safer way to approach the discussion so that people understand like high ability does come with its own special needs, but it doesn't come with the contextually disabling factors of some of the other neurodivergences. And so not to treat it in exactly the same way, like saying, yes, it's all special needs and they're all valid, but they need to be treated uniquely in the way that they are. So in that sense, it is a little bit more like, let's say, a cousin rather than a brother or sister, I think, but it's still in the family. Yeah. And so raising awareness around it, I mean, I think having these kinds of conversations just to introduce it into the broader neurodivergence field, and as the gifted field itself matures, because as long as the conversation isn't nuanced in the gifted field itself, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as it's gifted people are better than other people, gifted people are so smart that we don't have to be accountable, like, because if you're the smartest person in the room, obviously you know all the answers, and like that's just nonsense. But that's how it often gets simplified when there are like non-nuanced ways of engaging with it. So I feel like as the gifted field matures and the capacity to identify as giftedness is like becomes more nuanced, and people really understand like this makes you different, not better or worse, then the two can continue to mature that conversation together. So I was slow in talking about giftedness in the neurodivergence general space for that reason, but obviously I feel safe enough to do it now. So that means that the fields must have matured enough, at least from my perception, that I feel like there's really like fertile ground now for this conversation to start taking root, with things being able to remain nuanced and differentiated.
Yeah. I was going to say, when you're gifted, you know how much you don't know. Like there's a vast you're keenly aware of all the things you really, really don't know. And it's kind of annoying because you want to know it all, but you can't because it's impossible. But yeah, I agree. I guess, like I said in in the introduction, so some people might identify as like twice exceptional or multi exceptional. And I guess for me, I like saying I'm autistic, ADHD, and gifted, because maybe it's just my autistic brain, but I like to have that nuance, so people can understand, because like neurodiversity, like that can mean different things, and neurodivergent can mean different things. So I guess for me, in identifying in that way, I find that that really helpful. And especially because, like, as you said, giftedness hasn't been like part of this kind of this dialogue as well. So I like to highlight that. So I don't know, I guess, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about today, or thought was any other kind of lingering thoughts? Or
well, and not to put you on the spot, but I mean, I'd be curious, since you went through this gifted discovery, like what has been most important for you in terms of integrating it, like so that listeners are going, oh yeah, like if I want to embark on that question, on the giftedness question, like here's kind of what I could imagine happening in my future.
have we got another hour?
I got time.
I'll try. Teena's like,
Teena needs to sleep, but
Yeah.
Teena's like, it's enough time. Okay, I'll try. All right, I'll try and like condense and summarize. Oh God, where do we go? Oh, I think for me, I guess when I came to giftedness and into gifted, and like finding the website and everything, I was actually really, really struggling with my mental health at the time. I'd what year is it? 2024. So in early 2023, I got the autism and ADHD diagnosis. That was a whole thing. And then I went through some trauma therapy, and yeah, I was in a really really challenging space, and I listened to the Positive Disintegration podcast, and I was like, okay, I think I've had a few of those in my life. And I obviously read your blog and everything like that, and it just, as I said, it was just this last puzzle piece for me in understanding myself, because I'd for so long felt so socially isolated. I know, like, obviously I'm a social worker. Like, I know how to talk to people, I know how to connect with people despite being autistic. I have plenty of social skills, plenty of them. But it was more about, like, I could talk with people, but it was about really truly connecting, and feeling like there was something wrong with me. Like, there was some sort of deficit in me, because I couldn't feel this elusive connection with other people. And as I said before, I think when a big part of the giftedness assessment is that you have to do a lot of reflecting, and you have to try and explain to someone how your brain works, which is really hard, because like, you kind of spend a lot of time up there, but no one really asks you, oh, like, how do you think, and how does your brain work, and all this stuff. So you're sitting there going, wow, that's a really good question, and I don't know how to answer that, but I'll try my best. But even just that process was it was just good to get it on paper and get it out. And like, I shared it with Teena, and like, I shared it with my partner, and like, I shared it with other people, and I was scared. I thought, oh my god, they're gonna think I'm so weird. They're gonna think I don't pretend that I'm not weird. Like, I'm weird.
Yeah,
like,
I was
that's
going to
fine.
say it wasn't that document that
Yeah,
gave
right?
the weird label in my world.
Like, I'm not this highly person, like, going out there highly masking. Like, yeah, people can tell, but I was like, this is like next level, really weird. And yeah, like, Teena was really supportive, and my partner was really supportive, and I probably wouldn't share it with everyone, but it was really freeing, because there was like this part of myself that I was so afraid to show the light of day, because I was so afraid that people were gonna reject me, essentially, and just think I'm this complete utter weirdo. And it was just, when I had the assessment, it was really affirming for me. And also being able to, like, get into the gifted community and listen to other people's experiences and connect with them, and have those similar sorts of experiences. It was just really wholesome. I guess that's the word I would use. It's really wholesome, and I felt really settled after that. Like, like, as you were saying before, that some people might think, oh, well, if you're gifted, you're what was it, the tall poppy syndrome, and you think you're full of yourself, all this sort of stuff. It was actually the opposite. It was very humbling in a way, because it was kind of like, yep, you're gifted, and it's just this, you can just kind of embody it and sit with that and be humbled in that. You don't have to walk around to everyone going, hey, I'm gifted, hey, I'm gifted. It's just like, cool, that's a really cool part of myself. And there's some people who might be interested in hearing about that part of me, and there's some people who may want to connect with that part of me, but I don't have to do that with everyone, and that's okay. Like, I can let different bits of my weird out with different people, and I'm really lucky to have people in my life who I can do that with. So yeah, anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but that was my experience.
It does. And I mean, it's beautiful. And I mean, one of the reasons I ask you is because it's of course easy for me. I'm in the this is like my specialty, and so I can tell everybody it's worth it. Like, if you think you're gifted, like, go figure it out. You're gonna love it. But I mean, I'm a little removed from that more raw, fresh, experience of, like, that it's really transformational.
Yes.
And I think this is maybe one last thing I would add that you highlight. It's like, I don't think anybody can, I mean, this is my non-researched opinion
for
from what I've seen. I mean, well, researched, but not academically researched. Let's put it that way.
Anecdotal evidence.
Anecdotal evidence says to me that I don't think that a gifted or autistic person can really get to adulthood without having any kinds of pain, let's say at the extreme trauma, from just not understanding the self, trying to fit in, masking, the bullying, I don't know, you name it, exploitation, just feeling invisible, feeling parts of themselves are invisible. I mean, I could go on and on with the list. And so mental health is a huge concern, obviously, for the neurodivergent population, gifted people included, And so when we're thinking about like, why does it matter to find out this neurodivergence? This is a big part of it. Because if you're gifted and if you're neurodivergent in another way, and you're struggling with your mental health, some of the mental health questions might have to do with you being gifted. And if you're trying to solve those questions in traditional therapy that doesn't understand giftedness, if you're trying to solve those questions just like by going, oh, maybe this is related to my autism, like I'm just anxious because of my autism. Yeah, maybe. But also it could be related to giftedness and things that you're hiding away. Because as you're saying, Caitlin, like when I do the assessments, I mean, my job is really cool, right? Because I'm the one who receives the documents like Caitlin.
You must read such amazing things. I could only imagine what you get to read.
I mean, I get people's raw mind space. I mean, and people come generally to the assessments quite nervous, because they're like, I've never shared all this stuff with anybody. And fortunately, I'm not like a super formal person. Like I'm very professional, but not super formal. And I just really enjoy that people are vulnerable and, allow me in their space to help them kind of make some sense of it and map it out. And I just get to see these beautiful mind spaces, and sometimes those mind spaces have had to do a lot of suppression and the masking and stuff. And so in this process, like in the assessments, we're always looking at like, in which ways were you held back? In which ways did you hide? In which ways did you mask? And how can you shift that for yourself now? Like once you can start shifting that and saying, well, like you're saying, Caitlin, like you start to connect with other gifted people and then you're like, oh, well, I don't have to hide this part of myself with them. Maybe I don't need to express this part like all the time with everybody, but I need to know that I don't need to hide it. And that's different, like that shifts things a lot. And so a lot of trauma healing can happen and a lot of mental health can kind of magically improve once we have this understanding of this part of our experience, And even for somebody who's listening, who's like, well, I'm definitely not gifted, I don't resonate with any of that. It's still worth just finding out about what it is, because you probably have it of all your friends or of all your colleagues or whatever, you probably have at least one that's around you. And it's really nice when you can understand them. I mean, that's a big gift when you can at least understand what is that extra that they have, and just be kind to it and validate it in whatever way that you can. Even if you can't like reciprocate it, you can still validate it. And in that sense, like we all kind of provide some healing context for each other going through this process.
I think one of the biggest things I learned is that I can be authentic without being all me all the time. I think it's, as I said, it's like this humbling experience where it's like I can just be me, but I don't have to be like beaming me out to everyone at all times. So that was really helpful. And I think this has been such a great conversation. Honestly, we could probably go like for hours and hours and hours, but Teena's probably
we'll have to do the next one like super early in the morning, so my brain can function.
But then my brain would be done. Like I start to become functional at 9 and after that I can start to people, but before that, no people.
It has been a very, very interesting conversation though. And I want to learn more about it as well. Like I've read a lot of the stuff that Caitlin sends me, and it is just so interesting. And I think because it does all talk about giftedness from that different perspective, so it does change the conversation. And it's really cool. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was there anything like anything that you wanted to share with our listeners about InterGifted, or like anything that's kind of coming up in the next year or so, or anything like that?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, as we're talking about, like, it's worth being informed. It's especially worth being informed if you're a teacher, a parent, an educator, some, you know, wider education, or therapist, coach, mental health professional, social worker, etc. For that, I do offer trainings. I don't offer for parents, sorry, but I do offer
Figure out
for.
yourself.
I know. Well, for that, there's Our Gifted Kids, which I think is a great place. It's also an Australian who is working her magic in the gifted parenting world. So go check out Sophia's work at Our Gifted Kids if you're a parent. But yeah, if you're a therapist, if you are a psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker, anything in that space, then yeah, come train with me. I mean, it's for gifted therapists, because it's also like a self-guided like you have to go through your own giftedness discovery to really be able to be there for your gifted clients, you know. But it's a good place, and there's tons of information online at this point about these things. So like, even if you don't come to a formal training, like, take the time to research it. You will prepare yourself to be a wonderful guiding star or angel or whatever to many people that cross your path, you know, students or clients or whatever, because that recognition is like, it's gold, you know. Yes. So yeah, take the time to find it out. And, you know, if you have listeners who are like, they're coming to them, they're going like, well, what is giftedness? I don't think I really got what giftedness is. It's high complexity, higher than average complexity. So like, in all of these areas that we talked about, it's higher than average complexity, and that can show up in all kinds of different ways. And that's why it's worth, you know, taking the time to figure out how does it show up in real life so you can recognize it. Yeah, so in our InterGifted space, there's our community. So anybody's welcome to come join us if they feel like the label fits, so to speak. And yeah, we're all around the world. It's a great place to be. Lots of interesting things going on and interesting discussions and stuff. We do other courses besides the psychology training courses, the gifted psychology courses, and those are like around multi-potentiality, gifted writers, mindfulness for gifted people. We have a mindfulness community as well, practice community. And yeah, there's just all sorts of stuff going on. So check out the website. And we try to be pretty active on social media, providing education and, you know, just legitimizing the field bit by bit and providing content that is inspirational and also nuanced and realistic. So yeah, so anybody can find us on Instagram and everywhere else, you know, not TikTok, but all the others. Yeah, I think that covers it from my side.
Excellent.
But I really appreciated the discussion and the nuances that you brought to the question. I mean, I'll be curious to hear from listeners if they really find that, you know, the things that we talked about resonate, and also how it informs their, you know, bigger neurodivergence discovery and the integration process.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Yes, I've still got all these questions buzzing in my head, but I'll just have to let it go. Maybe another time.
Yeah, maybe a part 2. I would agree to start at 9.
Well, I'll just take a nap.
Take a nap.
Early
Yeah.
in the day.
Yeah.